Hey folks, we had a few misconfiguration issues with our lab environment this afternoon, and I wanted to highlight them and show you how to fix them in this quick video. As part of the configuration for the lab, you had to go in and create a port group called HBR-net, and that port group actually had to be on vSwitch 1, and in a couple of the configurations I noticed that the port group was created on vSwitch 0. So if you remember yesterday, if you had run into the problem where you were trying to configure your VRMS server, um, and the web page would come up and it wouldn't allow you to connect into it. Most likely the issue that you were running into was the port group was on the wrong vSwitch. And here I just fired up the knowledge base article, which identifies a resolution to the problem that some of you ran into after you had configured your VRMS server. During the configuration, a lot of you ended up using the IP address for the vCenter server instead of the fully qualified domain name. And the reason that people generally do that is because it's pre-populated. And so they're not sure what to do with that field, so rather than backing out the IP address, they just leave it there. And you'll notice here in the knowledge base article that it advises us as part of the resolution to go in and reinitialize the database, which really is a polite way of saying delete the database and recreate it, which is what we're about to do. And SQL Server Management Studio has been installed on all of your SRM servers, so this should be a very quick task. What I'm going to do is I'm going to log in. I'm going to go in and delete the existing database for the VRMS server, and then I'm going to recreate it. Now in this particular environment, we've already deleted the VRMS appliance. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is redeploy it since we've already cleaned up the database. And as I go through and deploy the VRMS, what you'll see is that I'm going to flip back and forth between the student handout that I gave you guys. And I'm just going to cut and paste the variables into the configuration of the VRMS. Now the settings that we're populating here, they can be fixed at a later time, but we want to get them set up properly the first time. If for some reason you fat-fingered the IP address, the default gateway, the subnet mask, what you would do is you would go back into the console of the appliance, you would log in as root and use the password VMware, and then you would log out, and that would bring you up a menu screen which would allow you to change the IP address, default gateway, subnet mask, etc. Now when we get to this screen, guys, what we want to do is we want to verify that the IP address listed here is actually the IP address of my vCenter server. Now, we installed Site Recovery Manager on our vCenter server, so the IP address will be the same for our vCenter server and our Site Recovery Manager server. So what I'm going to do in a couple of moments is I'm just going to fire up NSLOOKUP and just verify that the IP address 43.191 is actually the IP address of my vCenter/SRM server. And the NSLOOKUP results reveal that 43.191 is indeed the IP address of my vCenter/SRM server. So we're good to go here. And it just takes a few minutes to go ahead and deploy the appliance. Of course, it'll be much faster in this video. So as I'm waiting for the appliance to wrap up its installation, I just wanted to go and double check my runtime settings. Now, I already know that it's properly configured. The IP address of my vCenter server is here because I saw that during the installation of the appliance. But I just wanted to show you where that variable was entered in. And here you can see that the appliance has been deployed. It's actually up and running. And what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to open up the console so that I can show you the menu where you would change the IP address, subnet mask, default gateway, or DNS server settings somewhere down the road. Okay, and if you remember in our environment, one of the initial problems we had was that the IP address of the VRM server was incorrect. And so that data is static as of right now. I can't remove it. So what's going to happen when I click to configure the VRM server, it's going to try to bring me to this old IP address. And that's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to the correct address, and then we'll go into the web page to configure the VRM server. Now, since the link is bringing me to the wrong location, I'm just going to go in and change the IP address, and that'll allow me to open up the management page of my VRM server. And I'm just using the username root and the password VMware to log in here. Now, once I've successfully logged in, I want to go over to the configuration tab. Now, this is where a lot of the mistakes are made. And you really want to double check your settings. You want to go back and forth from your handout sheet to make sure that you're keying in the information correctly. And this is one of the big problems that we run into. As you can see, what we have listed here is the IP address of your vCenter server. But what we want to have here is the fully qualified domain name of your vCenter server. So I'm going to go ahead and backspace this pre-populated information out, and I'm going to put in the fully qualified domain name of your vCenter server. Now, as a return of the vSphere client, you should notice that after configuring the VRM appliance, what you'll now see is that that IP address has been correctly updated. And now we're in great shape. We've correctly configured the vSphere Replication Management Server at the protected site. We still have to go to the recovery site and also configure the vSphere Replication Management Server there as well. But we have successfully configured one side, and this will conclude the video of how to repair a VRMS installation.